Hey, Alabama basketball fans, welcome to episode 5 of the Blue Collar Podcast. It seems kind of strange that we're even saying that. The season seems so young at the moment. But as always, I'm Michael Stubben from Tide Hoops History, and I am joined, as always, by Emilee Smarr of the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com. I want to thank Emilee for making time to join us for this upcoming podcast, simply because today's a heavy travel day. She was on the road trying to get back to South Carolina, fought through traffic. So, Emilee, many thanks for finding time tonight to squeeze in another podcast before the Players Era Festival.
No, of course. Thank you for having me. I thought that it would be good for me to go ahead and condition myself for these late tip-off times. So happy to be here.
Yeah, it doesn't help that you're now thrown in the Eastern time zone, by the way.
It does not, and I did do it last year in Eastern time zone, so I've survived it once.
Well, let's do what we always do. Let's take a look back. Obviously, Alabama had a huge win, another huge win on the road in a hostile environment, even though it was counted as a neutral court game or neutral site game. You were on site covering it for the Tuscaloosa News. What are your reactions and observations now that you've had a couple of days to think about what actually happened up in Chicago? What impressed you the most by Alabama by that victory?
For one, I think that the way that they were able to compete in such a hostile environment, like you said, I mean, it was orange in that arena. So, and it was loud too. So to see them really rise to that challenge and come in Illinois' quote unquote house, even though it was a neutral site game. I think that that really spoke a lot for just how this team's able to handle intensity. But as far as what happened on the floor, there's no doubt that Keitenn Bristow closes the gap on this defense, and Alabama can, in fact, play defense. I was really pleased with what I saw, pleased to see that the turnovers were still, handled. That wasn't just a one-time thing. This is something that this team's actually really making an effort to take control of. And Labaron Philon, Mr. Clutch, can't forget that, especially with just the stretch that he had in those final minutes there. I really, again, and I've said this since the beginning, I really like how this team plays when their back's against the wall. And I think that Illinois was really a good statement win for them, especially coming into a game like Gonzaga.
So one of the things that I thought was pretty fascinating was, for some reason, Coach was not very pleased with Labaron Philon in the first 3 to 5 minutes of play. Actually took him out pretty early. If
Mm-hmm.
you remember, if we go back a year ago when Alabama played Illinois in Birmingham, Mark Sears did not have a great first half, took himself out of the game, and he didn't respond very well to the adversity. Labaron Philon came back in the second half and played like a madman. He basically closes the game out on a personal 9-0 run.
Yep.
What what do you think that says about LeBaron Philon, the player, LeBaron Philon, the mental toughness?
Well, I think that, LeBaron faced a lot of criticism for his shooting last season, and I know that we talked a little bit about his performance in the first 3 to 5 minutes and Oats not being happy with it. And again, I've said this the last couple of weeks, just LeBaron's kind of had a slow start, and I actually talked to him about that. He said that he doesn't like to call it a slow start. He likes to consider it him being unselfish and just kind of getting everything started for everybody else. So I think that to see him, just kind of stay locked in and know what his role, or at least what he perceives his role to be in the first half, to know that he still has that toughness in him to come back out in the second half and really just put on a game-saving performance. I think that it just reaffirms that we're going to see this guy go in very highly in the draft this year. LeBaron's really impressed me just with his resilience, and I think that we're going to continue to see that push through over these next 2 games. And I really think that he's kind of starting to get to where he's finding his role as a leader on this team and finding his voice, especially after having to step into the shoes of Mark Sears, who was a key leader for this team last year.
Keitenn Bristow. So we were all very glad to finally see his debut, and he did not disappoint. Almost had a double double himself. Seemed to be everywhere. He seems to just have twitchiness. How about that? He just seems to have a spark. What impressed you the most about Keitenn Bristow too in that game?
Well, what I really liked is that I'm pretty sure whenever I looked it up, Oates subbed him in 11 times. And any time that he just kind of noticed, or Oates noticed that something was awry on the floor, he would immediately look to Keitenn and tell him to be ready to go. And there's no, oh, well, I'm still sore. There's no, oh, well, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not going to, re-sprain my ankle or anything like that. He's just always ready to go. And just again, his physicality, his ability to guard all five positions, just like we said last week, if he were to come back, he was going to be the difference maker in that game. And that's exactly what Brad Underwood said. I think that the best thing about Keitenn is exactly what this team was kind of scared that they were going to lose whenever Mo Diabate transferred to Kentucky. He is the motor that Alabama absolutely has to have off the bench, and he's going to be really important this week with how much depth Alabama's going to be relying on over these next couple days.
Well, no disrespect to Mo Diabate because I love some Mo Diabate the last couple of years for Alabama. But the one thing about Keitenn is he's taller, he's
Yep.
longer, he seems maybe a little bit faster.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see how well he shoots. How about that? So very happy with what, even in a one game sample size of what we've seen with Keitenn. All right, one other glue player I want to talk about, Amari Allen. The guy's already won multiple hard hats. He seemed to be pivotal too as well. Do you feel like after in this small run that we've seen, the two glue guys for this team to get them through the tough times are now going to be Amari Allen and Keitenn Bristow?
I absolutely do. Because again, it wasn't really, I know that we've talked about Latrell kind of being a glue guy, but again, last week, Latrell, it didn't seem like he was fully at 100% or at least not competing at 100%. So obviously, the points that he did have and the plays that he did make were important, but time and time again, through every single game. We've seen how important Amari is. He's leading the team in rebound. I think he's led the team in rebounds every game. There was one where three different players split for four, and for some reason it's not coming to me right now. It's the travel brain. But, but he's consistently been willing to do the dirty work. And again, these are just his first few games of college ball. So there's really no telling where he could be by conference play by March. And not only that, but I also think that the fact that this team is able to rely on a freshman and know that he's key and give him the respect that, he deserves, even though, a lot of them are younger and they are newer pieces. The fact that they have no hesitation to trust him defensively is something that I'm really happy to see. And, same goes for Keitenn, especially with how, Keitenn kind of faced a little bit of scrutiny coming from Tarleton State coming into the season. I think to see these guys kind of, make the effort to knock those chips off of their shoulders, it says a lot. And it really speaks to the kind of players that Nate Oats wants on his team.
I mean, Oates still continues to have no hesitation with substituting freely. He substitutes like a mad scientist. So every time you turn around, there's someone coming into the game, someone coming out, sometimes multiple substitutions. And we've seen him in the past do full lineup changes. So he's not afraid to experiment regardless of who he's playing or the competitions. I think as you watch this team, and you tell me because you watched last year's team, you saw every game. And I don't mean this as any disrespect to the team last year because they accomplished great things and a wonderful team got to the Elite Eight. I think the floor for this year's team has a possibility of being higher than last year's because I haven't seen any mental slip where they're not dialed in at least and not out there hustling. How about that?
I completely agree with that. I think that, where there was a lot of hesitation to say that this team would make it even to, Sweet 16, I I have no problem saying that this team can reach another Final Four. I'm fairly confident in that at this point in the season, which, like you said earlier, is still early. But right now, if you were to ask me today if Alabama's going to the Final Four, heck yeah.
Well, you called it in our in our preseason preview. You had full confidence. I was being a little skeptical and hesitant. So you're bringing me over to your side. So let me just put it to you like that. All right,
I'm
let's.
glad that I'm doing my job.
Yes, you are. You have truly become an influencer. How about that? All right, let's turn the page. The schedule doesn't let up one bit. So Alabama has already gone through the gauntlet. You've gone through St. John's, you've gone through Purdue, you've gone to Illinois or gone through Illinois. Now you get to go to Las Vegas for the Players Era Festival. And what do you get? You get Gonzaga, a perennial powerhouse under Mark Few. They're currently undefeated. KenPom, I think, has them as the number 2 rated team. Now, granted, those KenPom stats are a little skewed. Technically, Gonzaga, I think, they haven't played a ton of great teams yet. What are you looking for in this matchup that's at 8:30 our time, Central Standard Time tomorrow night when they take on Gonzaga?
My big things that I would like to see limiting Graham Ike, limiting Braden Huff, limiting Tyon Grant Foster. I think those are my big three players that they're really going to have to key in on. This Gonzaga defense is relentless. They're one of the nation's top defensive teams, so only allowing, I think it's about 57, 58 points per game. I think that, Alabama is obviously going to have another strong performance defensively, especially against a team that's going to try to slow down the pace a little bit. And not only that, but their offense is pretty loaded too. They're averaging 94 points per game. And with those strong rebounding and field goal percentages, Alabama definitely has a bit of a challenge on its hands.
Alabama and Gonzaga, they had a two-game series in 21-22 and then 22-23, and they ended up splitting. But ironically, they split on each other's what you would call not home court, but at least backyard advantage. So, Alabama goes into Seattle and upsets number three Gonzaga with Jaden Shackelford just goes off on them. And then you think the next year when Alabama has Brandon Miller, Noah Clowney, that team, that they would make it 2-0. But no, Gonzaga comes into Birmingham, wins by 10. I think it was like 100-90. So this has been a very entertaining, albeit a small little sample size between these teams. Fans, again, if you enjoyed the Illinois game, this one's going to be amped up to even higher level. I was looking at their roster, and they've got size and they've got length, but I don't think it's still as overwhelming as Purdue. I kind of make it somewhat in between Illinois and Purdue, a combination of good length, good athleticism, and good coaching. So that's obviously a dangerous matchup. You mentioned Graham Ike. He's their leading scorer, 17 points a game. He's 6'9". Alabama had issues with Purdue's 6'9" guys, so that gives me pause right there. Who are you looking for to really make a stand defensively in this game?
I'm going to go with Keitenn again. I think that if he stays on this role, I really don't think that this Alabama team can be stopped. But of course, I would like to see Taylor Bolbowen have a great game. I'm not going to deny or refuse any rebounds that could possibly be offered, especially against Gonzaga. So I think that those two are important, but the more help that Aiden Sherrill can get at the five, I think is going to be critical for Alabama.
I was going to ask the biggest thing, and we've seen the one concern with this Alabama team is when they're on defense, they sure do foul a lot. Do you think it's the way they practice? What leads to the fact that this team consistently year in and year out fouls like crazy?
I definitely think it's the way that they practice because Alabama, it's not like anywhere else in the country practice wise, just from what I've seen. These guys are physical. These guys are throwing each other on the floor. I mean, the stories and tales that I've heard from Alabama practice are something. So it's one thing to, come to Alabama and be able to get your minutes on the floor once tip happens, but that's not even going to happen for you if you can't survive practice. And I think that these guys play the way that they practice. So I definitely think that that's a major contributing factor in the fouls.
All right. Ultimate question for this matchup. For Alabama to beat Gonzaga, they have to do what?
Gotta get some rebounds. That's my big one. I think that the more that if they're able to win the rebounding battle, I think it's going to be an Alabama victory. Obviously, they came too short against Illinois, but this Gonzaga team, just again with how strong they are, I think that rebounding the ball is going to be really important. And on top of that, which I know you asked for one thing, but I'm going to give you two. I think that the shooting is going to be really important. I think that we're going to have to see the consistency from three, which obviously we've seen that the pick and roll works. And that's the pick and roll is what Alabama's been using very heavily this season offensively. A big game shooting wise, I think a lot of threes because this Gonzaga team is going to be thick in the paint. I think that shooting and making the most out of their trips to the perimeter, getting the ball off really quickly, I think that that's going to be the make or break here.
I'm going to add just one thing, and
Yeah,
this is not what Alabama needs to do, but I'm going to just make the comment that it is really, really refreshing this season that I don't harp about turnovers. I have never seen in the last 2 years. That's all I ever focused on in these big games. Is Alabama's got to keep it to at least under 15 turnovers. Heck, now Alabama's keeping it to 10 or less. So, job well done with whatever Chris Fleming and what he's implemented, how they take care of the ball. Of course, I
no
guess it helps
doubt.
Yeah, I guess it helps to have Labaron Philon and Aiden Holloway in the backcourt too. So that helps a little bit. Okay. All right. If Alabama beats Gonzaga, well, regardless of whether they win or lose, they already know who they're going to play Tuesday night, midnight your time, 11 p.m. our time, UNLV. So UNLV actually has an Alabama connection. I'll let you highlight or expound on what the connection is with UNLV and Alabama basketball.
Yeah, Alabama fans didn't get to see him last year, but Naas Cunningham, he is he was the first player to hit the transfer portal after the Elite Eight run, and he wound up at UNLV. And he's actually having a really good year after redshirting last year for Alabama. He's off to a really good start. I'm sure that there will be an edge to him facing the team that he didn't really get to play for last year. I think that he's going to want to be able to prove himself. I wouldn't count out a Naas Cunningham breakout game, if you will. Oats even said today during press conferences that Naas is a great player. He's a great kid. He wants to see him do well. I'm sure that it's in the game plan to shut him down for sure. And of course, Oats being one of the guys that recruited him, he's gonna know how to do it probably better than anyone. But I don't think that it's gonna stop Naas from trying to make a headline game for himself.
Would it be too out of place to describe this UNLV game as truly the first trap game of the year situation for Alabama basketball, regardless of whether they win or lose against Gonzaga, just because of where it falls and how late it falls?
Yep, I definitely think that it's fair to say that. I have concerns just for myself staying up all the way through that game, which I will bear in mind that they're on the opposite coast, so it will be much earlier for them. But even so, it's still going to be a late tip, and again, back to back games after you just played a really physical Gonzaga team the night before. I think that Alabama's going to have to stay on their toes here and not just think, oh, yeah, it's just UNLV. We can come out with a win. I think that their physicality and their depth are really going to be tested this week.
Well, we know they have three games regardless. They've got two opponents already scheduled, and we know when they're going to play. After that, we have no idea. I know the Players Era Festival has these unique rules. They're going to look at these 18 teams, pick the teams with the best records, and then they go through, I think it's point differential, points scored, points allowed to figure out your tiebreakers to see how you get the Premier Four. All right, give me your thoughts or give me your prediction. What does Alabama do in the Players Era Festival? 0-3, 1-2, 2-1, 3-0. What's your gut telling you?
So if I think that they're going to win Gonzaga, and I think that they're going to win UNLV. The favorite to win the Players Era Festival is Houston. So that would be a rematch of last year's game that went to overtime. So, and that being said, I think that Kelvin Sampson certainly, if he were to get the chance to play Alabama again with his Houston team, I think that there's going to be a bit of an edge there, especially with what he said in the days leading up to this tournament. He mentioned that it was essential for Houston to play in this tournament. They didn't really have a choice because he said, "Have you looked at our budget? Have you looked at our fundraising?" And he actually even noted in an interview with Sportico that he didn't want to schedule Alabama or Rutgers or another, I think it was St. John's. No, it was Notre Dame, excuse me. But he didn't want to schedule those guys for the first two games where I don't know all the ins and outs of how scheduling works for Players Era Festival, but I'm assuming that coaches, based on what Kelvin Sampson said, that coaches have some influence in who they get to play. He didn't want to face either of those teams first because he's looking for Houston to make it to the championship. So that being said, with the path that they have, and if it is a possibility that they do end up in the championship, I think that Alabama's kind of going to have a run for their money there because they had Houston with fresh legs last year. This year, they're going to be pretty worn out by that championship game. And obviously, I think that had Latrell Wrightsville not gone down last year against Oregon, that Alabama could have walked away with that championship. But definitely, the stakes are higher whenever you've got money on the line. Last year, the payout was $1 million for every single team that participated, but now every team only gets a sponsor fee of $100,000, and the only team that walks away with a guaranteed $1 million payout on top of the $100,000 sponsor fee is whoever wins the championship. So there are also obviously financial awards in six figures for those runner-up teams, but stakes are definitely higher in Sin City.
Right now, it seems like you're saying 2-1 Alabama in the championship game, and if they run into Houston, that may be the chance that Houston finally gets a little revenge.
If they don't run into Houston, though, 3-0.
3-0. Okay,
Yeah.
3-0. All right, all right. Well, I'll tell you what I would love to see, and I don't think it will happen. I would love, obviously, I want Alabama to go 3-0, but if they're going to play somebody in that championship Premier Four, I would love for them to get a shot against Kansas. I know that's probably not gonna happen. I don't think Kansas is strong enough, but that's one of the blue bloods that we have not played yet since Oats has been here. We have played everybody else. We have played North Carolina. We have played Duke. We have played UConn. We have played everybody except Kansas. That's the last one I would like to see us matched up against. I tell you what, I'm gonna be the optimist this time. You've got me convinced. Let's go 3-0 in this thing. Let's beat Gonzaga, beat UNLV, and then whoever's there waiting on Wednesday in the Premier Four, let's take them out and keep this thing rolling because I like the attitude of this team. I really do. They're fighters and they don't quit and they don't give up and they really don't care. They are the most Nate Oates team I've ever seen from that
Yep.
standpoint, and we joke about that. All
They
right.
know who they are.
We know Keitenn Bristow is going to play. What is your best guess on do we have a chance to see a Jalil Bethea sighting in this tournament?
Okay, so Oates didn't give any injury update today
Ooh,
during press
interesting.
conferences, which I found very interesting, which nobody asked about Jaleel. That being said, I did have some boots on the ground that were in New York tell me that they spoke with Jaleel, and Jaleel himself. And obviously, I'm not confident enough in this to put it in print, but I'll say it in a podcast. Um, but they said that Jaleel himself is aiming for a return in the Players Era Festival. Now, does that happen against Gonzaga? I'm not sure, but do we potentially get to see him against UNLV? Maybe. Do they pull him out for the championship as a wild card? Maybe. That being said, I if Jaleel is that optimistic and that is what he thinks, then he's the one who's hearing from the doctor. So who am I to say no, it's not going to happen? I think that we are closer to his return or debut than we are farther from it. Keitenn, even though I mean we would think that he's good to go because of him debuting last week, but there were photos of him still wearing a boot when the team landed in Las Vegas. Now, of course, that could be a precautionary thing, just like how Parker Brailsford's boot is cautionary or precautionary for Alabama football. But that does give me a little bit of hesitation, I guess. I feel like 98% sure that we'll see Keitenn, but if I see you out of a boot, I like to see you stay out of the boot, you know?
You and I both have seen the photo, and I can tell you it's a very reliable source. So that's an authentic photo. It's not AI generated, but
Oh yeah, for sure.
but we also know the other part of that too. While it was disappointing to see Keitenn in a boot, I think it is precautionary. But there was one other player who was not wearing a boot, and that was Jalil Bethea. So we may have a Jalil Bethea sighting, as we joke about. Look, this Alabama team's doing great things, and they're still not shooting the ball at an elite level yet. They're
Mhm.
average. They're average shooting the ball. It's just that they're so fast, and with what they're doing right now offensively, they're just overwhelming people with the volume of shots. So
Fast and handling the ball well.
yes, they're not giving up. They're not letting the other team get easy baskets. They're holding on to the ball, and then they're just overwhelming you with shots. So I promise you, there may be at least 2 to 4 games later this season where Alabama has those nights where everybody's hot, and they are going to beat the tar out of like a couple of teams, and it's going to be ugly. They're going to obliterate them. I know it. It's coming. It is coming. It always
Joyless murder
happens.
ball.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and if I could pick the teams to have that against, I wish I could. I would just go ahead and tell you, but I'm not going to say that. I don't want to mention out loud, but I know which ones I would love to pick for that game, for those games to happen.
We got to
All
save
right.
it for another podcast.
Yes, we can do that. We can do that. All right. We will not have another podcast until after Thanksgiving. So everyone who's been enjoying our podcast, I hope you have a very safe and happy Thanksgiving. Emilee, you have a safe and happy Thanksgiving because again, you traveled and I appreciate you joining us as always. Please tell everyone how they follow your good work.
Of course, first and foremost, thank you all for watching. Second of all, thank you for bearing with me through my travel brain through this podcast. We're fighting for our lives out here. That being said, I'm glad that before the next time I talk to you, I will have time to recover mentally from these ungodly tip times. But yeah, as far as how to reach me goes, Emilee Smarr, I'm not sure where my name is popping up, but this is how you spell it. Emilee, two E's. Emilee_Smarr on Twitter, Emilee Smarr Reporter on Instagram. And of course, you can always find my work at TuscaloosaNews.com. Just go ahead and find my profile, and you can find every single thing that I write.
We are very fortunate to have her here on the Blue Collar Podcast. And I have been very negligent in my Crimson crossover duties to mention that the basketball podcast that the channel is producing, they are on fire. Everyone is excited about Alabama basketball. So please, everyone, go to the Crimson Crossover YouTube channel. If you like what you see, please subscribe. There's the main Crimson Crossover podcast that comes out usually weekly. That's part of the Field of 68. You know what Emilee and I are doing here on the Blue Collar Podcast. And you guys really need to check out what Charles Branch is doing too on the Crimson Crossover cross court. Every game, he's reaching out, finding a media member or someone who's very familiar with the opponent and getting a really unique perspective from the other team. And I'm not going to spoil who the guest may be, but I'm going to tell you when it comes up to the Yale game, and this sounds really funny, everyone needs to watch that podcast when he has the Yale preview, because if he gets who he's trying to get, I'm going to tell you, you're going to really enjoy it. But a lot of great things on the Crimson Crossover YouTube channel. Please like, please subscribe, please follow Emilee on X.
And I did want to throw in another thing. For Thanksgiving, Tuscaloosa News has a very fun Alabama basketball story about someone that you may or may not know who was on this screen that is not me and his comrades
Nah.
now this week. So
Well,
make sure to stay tuned for that. Very fun and heartwarming stuff.
I'm going to have to run it on Thanksgiving and go to one of the boxes and buy about 6 different copies. Or
You're going to have to get a physical paper.
Look, part of me, I came from the old newspaper days, so I still have an affinity for the old physical media, especially on things like this. So those are really, really important. All right. As always, she can't say it, but I will. Roll Tide, everyone, and happy Thanksgiving. And we will be back soon with our next podcast.
Bye, y'all.